Welcome to Brunch with Believers, where we bring practicality to spirituality for athletes. I am Stephanie. I am excited to be here and wanted to talk about a subject that's kind of been hitting me even in the last few weeks as we've celebrated the holidays. And for those of you, many of you I know, especially as we've gone through this pandemic and just life in general, have experienced loss, grief, and so sadness. We're still in our Sabotage limiting beliefs series. And one of the ones that we're going to talk about today is the limiting belief of sadness and what that looks like and what that does to us. And so I want to just quickly say we all experience sadness. We all experience sadness. So no one is exempt, much like every other emotion or limiting belief we've spoken about. Everybody will experience it in our lives. If you haven't, you will. And it comes in so many ways. Sometimes it's our like for me, what I'm talking about, like I'm triggered during the holidays because of losses I've experienced of my parents or just not having people around. And then in the middle of this pandemic, for people who are continuing to isolate themselves or being in quarantine because you've had to have the experience of having COVID. All of those things can bring sadness as one of our limiting beliefs into plain view. It's a natural part of our experiences here on earth. Many instances in the Bible we've seen where people have experienced sadness as well. And the one that comes to mind most for me is Job. And if you don't know the story about Job, I'll give you the kind of brief, short Cliff Notes version of it. Job was a man who loved the Lord. He had a good life. He had riches, great family, great health, pretty much what we would want to see in totality in our lives, to feel like we're living blessed lives. And he was tested. The enemy asked God, said to God, the only reason he loves you and he follows you and he's committed to you is because you've given him everything, because you love him and he loves you. And so God gave the enemy, fine, do what you do. Enemy goes and he takes Job's money, he takes Job's health, and he takes Job's family. And says, now what? And so that challenge that God allowed Job to have to go through saddened him, because he thought, why would this happen to me? I'm living my life right. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He started to question, like, what have I done? And that would be rightfully so what we would think, right? And so he was sad. He was struggling to understand, why did this happen to me? We experience sadness. And whenever the reason we begin to question God, the same way Job did. Why is this happening? Why am I experiencing this thing that makes me feel like this? But we have to be in a place where we say, like Job, but God, I trust you. I know that's hard to hear. I'll say it again. We have to be strong like Job. Job was, to continue the story, Job literally said, he had friends that came and said, you had to have done something wrong, that, maybe you need to not trust God so much. Like, he had all kinds of influences that were not necessarily of God that were coming at him. But he stood strong and said, no, God, even in this mess, I'm going to trust you. Even in what makes me feel so sad. His body was racked with all sorts of sores, and he was sick, and he didn't even have one family member. None of the riches that he had before, his houses, everything gone. Just imagine, everything's gone. So I'll put this in terms for the athlete. You've worked your whole life to be something. I just remember in particular one situation with I'm not going to say names, I'm just going to give the scenario with a particular football player who was absolutely on track, went to an SEC school, running back, top person on their team, doing well, projections were out, number one, and he went and he got hurt. I mean, it was a horrible, horrific, one of the worst. I've seen it happen since, but that was the first time I'd seen where we were actually able to see somebody have such a horrific injury. And his whole thing, you can imagine, he felt much like Job in that moment. I don't know him, but I can imagine that he felt like Job. Like, what have I done? Why did this happen? But even in that, we have to pick ourselves up and say, but God, we trust you. That even in this, what looks horrible, what feels horrible, that you have done what you've done for a reason. You have brought me to this space and this place of sadness. It's for a reason. And the reason I'll say is this: it's for us to trust him more. Even when it doesn't look good, trust him more. Imagine the sadness that Abraham had to have. God had promised him this son with his wife, Sarah. And Sarah was 99 years old when she finally had their son. And their son, God then said, go and sacrifice him. Wait, what? You want me to kill? Huh? And he went. Sad, I'm sure. The whole time they were on their journey to the place where he was going to sacrifice him. Sad, I'm sure, but trusting God nonetheless. And in both of these stories, we see that the person gets the victory because of their trust of God, in spite of the sadness that they felt. In spite of it, it's going to happen. But in spite of it, they still stood the test and trusted God. And so that's what I encourage you to do. In both of these stories, we see Job, everything was restored to him, and it was restored to him tenfold of what he had before. And with Abraham, he gets to where he's going to sacrifice his son, and a ram is in the bush. So God says, you don't have to sacrifice your son. I just wanted to see what you would do. In that obedience, in that space of him being sad, he still trusted God. And that trust is what we have to lean on when we're in those moments of sadness. But God, you said, but God, you promised in your word, these are the things that you say. And so being in that space and in that place to give God your trust when you're feeling in those moments of sadness. So in the midst of the sadness, we will see God show up for us. So stay there in that place of trusting God. No matter what brings you to that place of sadness, trust God. So I hope this has been helpful. Please take the time to comment. These videos are on my page, The Crowned One. And I want you all to know that my heart is definitely for seeing the athlete be the best version of themselves, and that includes being whole in your spiritual life. So I hope this is helpful, and I will see you soon.